What's up, everyone? Welcome to Unmasked, where things are discovered, uncovered, brought to the light, and made known. I'm your host, Lamar Barrett, coming live to you from Prince George's County, Maryland. If you're interested in finding out about the untold stories behind being a college coach, this is the show for you. Being a former assistant men's basketball coach for 16 years, there are so many untold stories behind the scenes in the life of a college basketball coach. Now, let's unmask them. Today's guest is and I'm going to say long time now because he's been in it long enough, more than, 10 years plus, even though he's a young guy with a tremendous work ethic, great talent evaluator and recruiter, terrific teacher and great skill development coach, excellent O's coach, one of the best in the country, actually. And he's also the creator of his own basketball website, a resource website for basketball, pickandpop.net. And he's a Portland, Maine native, Zak Boisvert. And I'm gonna make sure I say that right. I always give him a spin. So
hey, you're good. You threw some extra French flair on it. I like it.
There you go. So and then talk about Zak a little bit. He's a graduate of Fordham University. He was a manager there for 4 years. And I like when we talked about it off air. He earned his title. So he wants to make sure people know that he was a manager. And even before he got into the college ranks, and we go back a little bit in the history before I even go on with his resume, Zak actually was an intern for me during the summer. He worked for me during the summer. I'm sure we'll get into this story about a certain recruit that ended up an NBA player down the road. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But that was actually an interesting moment. And I always knew that Zak would do very well, whatever he, in college basketball. And so from Fordham, he goes to Iona, where he has a chance to be a recruiting coordinator at a young age, 2010, 2011 year. He goes to the hoop group the next year. So they're going to brotherhood again. He had a chance to be working as a team events director. And from there, he goes back to Iona for 12-13 season as an assistant coach, where they had a chance to win a championship. And then 13-14, he made a decision he probably get into later on. He went to Fairleigh Dickinson University, and I don't fault him at the time why he made that decision to be an assistant coach, but he's going to educate guys on this. And then from 2014-16, had a chance to go back home, work at Maine University as an assistant coach before going to Army for the last 5 years, 2016 to 2021. Army at West Point as an assistant coach. We talked about it when you can go to anywhere in the Patriot League, Ivy League, one of the military academies, which is in the Patriot League. You can recruit anywhere in the country. That just helps you. It builds your resume. And then he's presently now, probably not even a month now, or close to it anyway. He's at Indiana State University. Welcome to the show, to a guy that I saw as a college guy, as a college student, college manager, who's grown in this business, one of the best in the country, especially X's and O. Man, welcome to the show, Zak.
I appreciate it, man. LB, you and I go back since 2008, working that hoop group camp together. So it's funny, honestly, I chuckled when you said a long-time coach, despite being so young. And literally, I'm thinking back 2008 is that's all I wanted. All I wanted was to be a college coach. And so you told me in 2008, that was my dream right there to do that. So it's actually cool. It's actually kind of cool for you to hear you say that even.
Well, look, man, I'm glad you could come on and spend some time. I know it's busy. You start a job right away, and that's gonna be actually one of the first questions we get into. But starting right away, and then you got to move, and it's so much stuff. You're moving from New York to Indiana. I mean, that got to be even tough. So I know how that is. But hey, you came here to get unmasked. Let's get unmasked. First question, Zak. I love to ask guys. There's no handbook to being a college coach. This is something you always wanted to do. You knew that. Yeah. Tell me about your first day. First week, first month. After things are done with human resources and orientation, especially no one gives you direction. It's funny when you ask all these guys in coaching, you ask them about it and they try to steer you away from it, even though they know you want to be in it. But talk about your the first time, because no one gives you direction. Talk about that.
And you're talking here at Indiana State?
It could be anywhere. It could be when you first
Well,
started.
it's funny. Well, I think Indiana State's a good example because you said, he's been out there about a month. Like the crazy thing is, LB, is my first official start day I work at Indiana State is tomorrow. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't been out here for the last month wearing Indiana State gear, calling coach, calling kids as a member of Indiana State. And even like what's crazy is Jimmy Allen, had let me finish some things up at Army. So even like last week, I was working out of Army because I needed to be back on the East Coast, but I'm calling kids, from my office at Army, but I'm, even calling, kind of finishing up there. But so it's been a little bit weird, but that's a great example. And you had asked earlier before we hopped on, you said, have you moved out there yet? And I said, technically, but I haven't moved in anywhere because all my whole life is packed in the back of an SUV that's been sitting in our staff parking lot here for the last week. So there's just a kind of a whirlwind aspect to it. And it's not, part of it is, and I don't want to sound bitter on it because I think the day you become bitter in this industry, you should get out. Because frankly, it will bitter you. At times it will bitter you. And even at times I'll catch myself like saying things that sound bitter, and I don't want to do that because ultimately at the end of the day, I don't want to sound corny, but Don Meyer line, the worst day in coaching beats the best day doing anything else. And like, frankly, that's what I love. I mean, I love doing it. So I don't want to sound bitter to it, but I've been out here for about 3.5 weeks for about just about a month. I came out just right around April 1, drove 12 hours west. I'm on the phone with my dad as I pull into Terre Haute, and he's like, ask me, how is it? And I'm like, he's like, no other industry does things this way. So it's been a whirlwind since I got out here. The biggest thing is since I got out here, just trying to find a way to wrap our arms around the guys that are still in the program. And then also the reality of it is we needed 8 scholarships. We had 8 scholarships open. So right away it was wrap our arms around the 5 that are staying here. And then we had a interesting situation where we had to re-recruit a guy that we think is as good of a player as there is in the league. And so kind of the first day was like, understand that's the best recruit on our board. Because if he decided to open it up and go in the portal, he'd end up at the highest of high majors, the Blue Bloods. So that was an interesting situation. But as well, we need to figure out a way to kind of find eight, fill up our last 8 scholarships, and it's something we're not done on yet.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that, like you just said, that sums it up because you thrown into it. Oh, we got to get 8 guys. First recruit your guys, then get 8 guys. That's a big thing, especially in today's portal. It's about the portal now, and so that's another subject for another day. I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
When we talk about recruiting, and so you're in the midst of it now. Anyway, you've always done a great job of that. Like, recruiting is the lifeline of college athletics. Like, you have to recruit good players if you want to be successful or win. You have to recruit good people, and you have to recruit good students. And like, in your being at West Point, you recruited totally different than you did at Iona and Fairleigh Dickinson, but you still, at all those places, you want to recruit kids who are good students. And good students doesn't always mean they have to be all A's.
Yeah.
But it has to be a kid who wants to get a degree, who like it means something to them. So when you have kids like that, they could be, I always say when I was in the Ivy League and Patriot League, I wanted good players to happen to be good students.
Yeah.
So that means if they're good players that happen to be good students, I know that they're going to be successful in all the places, whether it's basketball, whether it's athletically, socially, and academically. Talk about your best and worst recruiting stories, or like just what you think about in recruiting in general. Talk about that.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with kind of my different experiences, and like a couple things would be like I would say is your point's really good about recruiting good basketball players happen to be good students, and like sometimes I think people get twisted on. They hear guys talk about character. So I gotta package this in a way because hear me out. They'll talk about character. Well, understand, we're not recruiting Boy Scouts here. So ultimately, you have to, like, if you fall in love with a person first, it works backwards because then it shades you and you're watching this player and you're shading as like, I love this kid. When frankly, you got to identify the certain level of player you're looking for, and then does he match your values? Does he match your character? And there's the old Skip Prosser line of like, is he better than his problems? Because at a certain point, is the guy so good that it's like, we're willing to. Now, I think there's some programs that are just won't budge on that, and they've been very successful that way. And I'm not sitting there saying recruit crooks and criminals, and I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying I think sometimes we glorify the value thing with an understanding of like, ultimately, you got to evaluate talent first and then judge the character. And a really interesting point on that, and I can't say an NBA team. An NBA team went and looked at, they had some people from different organizations, so they were able to objectively evaluate the hits and misses of the NBA draft over the last decade. And they did this study, and the number one thing that guys whose careers didn't pan out had in common, first round picks over 4 different organizations over the last decade, the number one thing they had common, it's going to shock people. They all scored well and tested well in interviews, and they had what people called charisma. And what they did, what they showed them, is that it's not that these guys misled them in like were bad guys and they came off as good guys. It just, they wowed people in interviews, and it led them to projecting them as better than they were, and they were overdrafted. And they, fact of the matter was, they weren't as good as they need. They weren't as good as they need to be. But their character in their interview put them at a pedestal and forced them to be overdrafted. And I think that's a really good point to make. Of like, you got to evaluate the player, and then you got to do the background checks. Then you got to have the research. You have to be able to get at the answers of who they are as people. You know, LB, does that make sense on you? And I want to make one certain point, because then it gets real hard in a second.
No, it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense.
So we had the NFL draft just pop up. All right. That was just last night. And they pour millions and millions of dollars in background research. They have entire personnel. Departments set up to vet these guys. And they have multiple people in these departments, and they still screw this thing up more often than not. And we're, as college coaches, we don't have the ability to, we don't have those background, we don't have the resource to do it. So we're leaning on guys. And then frankly, you call the high school coach, that high school coach, if you don't have a previous relationship with a guy, he wants what's best for the kid, and he might be selling the kid on you. So they screw it up more often than not in the NFL. And then it's like, and we don't have the personnel they do, and we got to do it. And then the important thing is this, and I love this. Stan Van Gundy always talks about, he says there's a big difference between basketball character and character. Because the toughest, most selfless kid I've ever coached, the best leader I've ever coached in basketball, his past was checkered. I mean, he had bad, and it wasn't the easiest 4 years for him, and he had stuff in his past, and he had tattoos all over his body. He had affiliation with gangs. He had drugs. And my point is this: basketball character, he was elite, but he had certain serious character issues that you'd say. And I'm not even saying that as like I have an answer to it. I'm just saying this thing's a lot harder than sometimes people try to make it to be.
I totally agree with you. I mean, and you made that comparison. Like, you're asking, actually 70% of my job is intel. Yeah. Like, I can go and evaluate all I want. I'm not making a decision on who would draft. I'm making a decision. I go and evaluate and say, this is who I think is really good, but I got to find all the information. On college level, you got to recruit and find information and decide. And so that's why it's an easy transition, college coaches being able to go in the NBA and do scouting, because you're doing all that anyway beforehand. So I totally agree with you on those points. Those are great points that made, great educational tools that I hope people listen to them. I'm gonna ask you this because people don't understand, man, college coaching, and you say you wanted to get in it. It's 355, 360 days out the year. I mean, it's you don't get a chance to spend time with your friends. Like everyone else has a normal life. Coaches don't have a normal life. They can't, they can only go on vacation at certain times of the year. And when they're on vacation, they're really not even on vacation. You're trying to figure out, how do I sneak away from my girlfriend, wife, fiance, and make these calls to these recruits and trying to get them on campus when you get back, or like, you know, you got the official visit for the weekend and that takes a ton of time. Like, you just don't have, it's so much stuff going on. But what did you have to sacrifice? Now, I don't say give up, I say sacrifice, achieving your current level of success?
And it's an interesting question. And one thing is, like, you gotta love it, because at any point, if it starts feeling like work for you, and like that's why I don't talk about the grind at like I try to refrain from that, because my point is, like, this has never been like work for me, and so I don't say that as like I'm grinding out here, grind more. Like, I love doing this stuff. So you know, people always ask me like you know, about watching film, because I've developed that niche a little bit for myself. And that my point is, like, when it's 11 o'clock, I never force myself to watch film. Like, shit, I'll be like, that's the stuff that I've been wishing I was doing since 6:30. And so, like, at any point, if I force myself to watch it, you gotta fall in love with doing it. And frankly, if you don't love it, then it's gonna be awkward, because what's so crazy about our business is there's a dude who's willing to, there's 10 dudes willing to do it for $1 less than you're just signed to do it for. And they're gonna, you know, it's a cutthroat business with it. So frankly, you got to find a way to love doing it, because if you don't, then you're just going to get worn out by it. Things I've had to sacrifice. Like, now, ultimately, I'm a nerd and I'm a loser. I love watching film. So I'm actually not a big like going out guy. So like, frankly, like, I can't really talk about that. But there is a situation where, like, in your life, especially early, I was so committed to this job, and I was so committed to never turning down a basketball opportunity, because that was my like big thing, that was my North Star. Like I heard Kevin Eastman say it, and it tremendously helped my career. But like, my thing was never turn down a basketball opportunity. And I had a serious relationship kind of go as a way of that, because frankly, I wasn't making any money and I was working all the time. And there's a little bit of like, hey, like, and I just had a different track of what I wanted in life. Right there. I was in my early mid-20s. I was like, boom, 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 boom. I want to make this work with the coaching thing. And frankly, the other individual was kind of wanted to go her separate way. And so that's something that comes to mind. But I also want to say, like, at no point was I like, this a sacrifice, because I just love to do it. I mean, that's all I wanted to do, was be a college basketball coach. I remember sitting there. It's funny, Colin Curtin. I remember him and I were sitting on an two air mattresses at College of New Jersey, both working for UNO8. And we were just sitting there like, we just want to be a college coach so bad. And like, in that room was Sam Ferry, who ended up, who's now at Holy Cross, Tyler Laurie, who was at College Charleston and Temple. I remember just having that conversation on the edge of air mattresses, working 18-hour days for no money, and we were just talking about how badly we just wanted to get to that level of being a college coach and be the one out there recruiting at Eastern Invitational and doing that stuff. And so does that make sense, LB?
No, it do. And that's why I said, like, your answer don't have to be, it's no guaranteed answer. I just think, and you're authentic. You're like, your answer is great. And you throw out some names like, wow, y'all was so young. I mean, that was 13 years ago. And I'm like, to see where you guys are now is unbelievable. Like, that was an unbelievable staff that summer, of you guys working. That's man, I'm damn. I got goosebumps thinking about that.
It's funny. It was you and Mike Farrelly as as elite directors. Chris Zupko was in the office, and obviously Keller and Kennedy. But then even on that staff, that was so good for me networking, because like Chad Babel was working camp. He was trying to get Kyrie Irving on his team because he wanted to get him on the Gauchos.
I got chewed out for that one.
He wanted to get him on the Gauchos. That was where Russ Smith, that was where Kyrie got his first offer.
Correct.
Dave Lato, I think, was at Virginia at the time. I don't know if I'm making that right. And he offered Kyrie. And then it was like, that was the first one. And then that was where Russ Smith really blew up.
I think Vince Baldwin for that one, because he was supposed, like, I kept trying to convince him Kyrie should be at Nike. Yeah. He didn't go to Nike. Ray Miller calls me up. I need Kyrie in camp. That was an easy decision. Yeah. So I think Vince from Nike on that one. Like,
and I remember Calipari flying in to come see Rakeem Chris.
Billy Donovan flew in. Yeah. Like, that was huge. That was huge. That definitely was huge. No, that was actually really good. That was actually really
and that was
good.
so cool for me. I was a young kid, and I'm like, literally, there's just a world you don't know, and I was just like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, that was an awesome time right there. You talked about you're the I said it earlier, one of the best X's and O's guys in the country. Scouting reports. We know how huge that is in college athletics. Like, it's all about preparing your teams to be successful. You want to put them in the best position to be successful. Yeah. We all know that if you give them too much information, that they're gonna. You can't give them too much, but you got to give them enough that they can, they can take it, run with the game plan. And we also know that verbiage is huge. Like, being able to deliver the game plan, they can understand it. And also the coach, he's believing in you to put us in a position to win games, knowing that and like I said, with the knowledge you have, you've done a great job over the years. And those guys trust and believe you, and the players trust and believe you, because we all know this, and you've probably been in it, where you're telling coach, like, coach, he's struggling from shooting the ball. He's 2 for his last 30. He goes in the game and makes his first 2 shots. And coach is turning and looking at you like, well, you told me he couldn't shoot. Coach, I didn't say he couldn't shoot. He's struggling. Or the players see the same thing. Like, coach, you told me he's still a Division I player. But talk about your best and worst scout reports you may have had over the years, or just, scout reports in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing is, at the end of the day, there's nothing that drives a relationship. I swear, like, ultimately, kids want one thing from you is, can you make them better? And I really think it doesn't matter if you're white, black, green, like, former manager, great player. Like, ultimately, if you can help them, and if you tell them, hey, when they fake the pass left and swing the ball back to the right, there's a misdirection UCLA coming, like, and it happens, and they jump to it and they beat that screen. Like, there is so much value to be had if your players can trust your competency, and if you tell them something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And, or if you develop a skill with them and it works and they see it happening in the game, like, that is such a powerful thing. And, like, I even go back, like, so, like, we were talking about, I was a student manager at Fordham, and we all know, like, those first couple times when, like, something happens, and, like, I still remember we're playing, we weren't very good at Fordham, and St. Bonaventure at the time wasn't very good. Mark Schmidt had just gotten the job. We're playing up at Fordham, and we're playing up at St. Bonaventure, and we had a kid, Faro Ali Hodgick, that ended up leaving Fordham, going to Indian Hills, and ended up having a nice career at UAB, and is having a great career overseas. Just got married. And I was a junior at the time. We're playing at St. Bonaventure, and you know how it is, LB. When you get 2 teams struggling, it's like the Super Bowl, because both those teams need a win so badly. And it's the second half, and Faro was big on pounding this dribble middle, getting to the midline. And what do I know? I'm 20 years old, and I'm seeing this. I'm like, Faro could just catch it and spin baseline just for a score. And I'm sitting there watching it, but, like, I'm only 19, 20 at the time. And so, like, I'm not at any point to, like, jump in the huddle and be like, Faro, here's what we're going to do. So timeout happens, and I go to set down the chairs, and I set down the chairs, and I linger. I see Faro come to sit down. I linger a little bit, and I go, Fa, just catch the ball. Next time you catch on the block, just quick spin baseline, just catch it and go. And he, like, looks at me a little bit, because I was actually pretty good in my role. I stayed in my role. I stayed in my lane. And he looks at me. He's like, really? I was like, just catch it and just turn baseline and you'll dunk it. 2 minutes go by. He catches the ball. Left block, catches, spins over his right shoulder baseline, hammers a dunk, points to me on the end of the bench. And I'm telling you right now, Cloud nine isn't even the level. I'm up on 13, 14, 15. I'm flying super high. We end up winning a close game. And I'm telling you, like, I was like, that feeling right there, I need that. And so, like, with scouts, like, it just played into it. And we all remember our first scout, and we were so locked in, so nervous with it. I always swear that you pass a certain, like, you talked to me about being a long time in coaching. Like, I swear when you kind of switch it, and when you, like, kind of become a coach, is when you stop keeping track of your scout record, and when you can joke around during the scout, and you're not so nervous and uptight that you can actually joke around and throw in a joke during the scout. I swear that's like the two things that you can mature, as you can tell you're there, you're there. How we did scouts at Army is actually really cool. LB is we really went offense defense with it. So I actually didn't watch a single second. Like we'd be playing, and I'd pick it up from practice. So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm telling you right now, like I wouldn't watch a single second of BU's offense. I would be only watching their defense and only scouting their defense and how we can attack their defense. But it even create a cool thing of like where I'd be watching, I'd be scouting BU's defense. I'd be watching a ton of Colgate offense. And so like, I even would know things about Colgate's offense, just not even studying it, but just knowing it and be like, why doesn't that dude ever, like he draws a crowd and always tries to score over help. So you just get, but I really like that approach we've taken for the last 3 years at Army is to really take an offense defense approach where I and someone else had the defense. So they were locked in on, how Colgate ran offense, but I was just locked in on how Colgate was going to guard us.
That's interesting, and more people have gone to that.
Well, because in LB, if I can jump in, one reason why I think it has is in the normal thing of scouting, in the normal process of scouting that everyone did for really the last, I would say 4 or 5 decades, is the thing that was lost was attacking their defense, because you weren't always going to get, you weren't going to get reamed out necessarily if they were a little bit more up to touch on a pick and roll coverage than maybe you had thought or you had told your boss. You were going to get ripped if they kept getting that misdirection stagger on you for an open shot and your boss turned over your shoulder and like, have they run that before? So my point is, if you do it the traditional way, it's fine. But what ends up getting lost is how we can score on them. And by doing it this way, you're making sure that's, that you're tracking that.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's the biggest challenge you think you've experienced since you've become a college coach?
Biggest challenge since becoming a college coach. There's challenges day to day. There's challenges in terms of like, I haven't been at the best jobs. Army's a tough job. Army's a hard job to win at. University of Maine's a hard job to win at. FDU, a little bit less so in the NEC, but FDU is not an easy job. So like, there's been challenges within the league, where you're trying to figure out, hey, how do we beat out a school? Like, because frankly, you're at Army, BU and Bucknell offer the kid, you're not getting them. So like, you're trying to find a way to, how do we package our story? And Army was really good with that, and really, and even have traces of the hoop group. What hoop group taught me recruiting wise was how to work the phones. Mike Rice used to say, I don't know if Mike Rice used to say, have phone sex. And he's like, you got to be able to work the phones. You got to be able to build relationships on the phones. You got to be able to call someone who you don't know, and you got to be able to build a rapport with them. Army was really good because we had this really complicated thing. We had this thing that kids didn't grow up wanting to do, and you're calling and trying to package it in a way and trying to sell them on, hey, you're not thinking the military right now, but this is what it can do for you. And even like with you at Brown, it was like, hey, this is why you should pay $40,000 to go to school, even though you can do it for free. And like, you all have a challenge, and how do you package that? And how do you sell that story to a kid? And how do you make him and his family understand the value in it? So that's a challenge. Frankly, a challenge for me, this is a good one, is keeping your emotionality in check. Trying to coach. I did a podcast a year ago about, it was really helpful for me, about trying to coach without anger, trying to coach in the way that, trying to be the leader your players need. Those would be two things I would say, is just the natural of coaching in a job where you may not be the best job in the league, and then trying to keep your emotions in check and trying to coach with anger, trying to coach without anger, and trying to be the best coach you can for your guys.
I love that, keeping emotionality in check. I like that one. I'm still that one. I like that one. Do you ever find that things about you that people misunderstand? What are they? Some people like, I don't really care about that stuff, but people see you like, I know you've always been a hard worker, like grinder. You work your butt off, like you've done stuff. If you anything that people might misunderstand about you?
Absolutely. And like one was like, so Pick and Pop done that was Bob Walsh was really in my ear. So he was like, Zach, you need to brand yourself. And he's like, Zach, you're a small white dude that didn't play. There's thousands of you out there. You have to find a way to brand yourself as something different. And he was like, you should do a website. And I loved coaching notes. I loved watching film, and I loved that stuff. And I frankly, Lamar, I really did want to share it with others, because frankly, that's how I came up in the industry. Is I studied the game. Tom Crean, I was a manager at Fordham. I wrote him a letter. I wrote every coach in the country that wasn't a player, that didn't play college basketball. I wrote them all. I was on my Buzz Williams thing, man. I was like, and Josh King actually still calls me to this day. He calls me Buzz, because he says he says that's how I wanted to be growing up. But I wrote every coach in the country, and Tom Crean wrote me back, and he gave me advice, and we talked on the phone for 20 minutes, and our conversation really kind of pushed me forward for my rest of my career. And he said, Zach, everyone says recruiting. Now, recruiting is incredibly important. Frankly, Lamar, it's actually more important than I'd care to admit, because frankly, whatever scheme you're running, you can run a worse one if you had a better player doing it. Like that's the scary thing of it. So I acknowledge it, and it scares me how important it is, but also it doesn't stop me from really loving the coaching side. And also Lamar, it's also, recruiting is very important, but also being able to coach your guys, being able to organize and be able to build relationships with them, being able to be sound schematically is important as well. But recruiting is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and everything else comes into play. So Tom Crean calls me and he says, hey, Zach, everyone says recruiting, but there's also always going to be a need in our game for people that study the game and really study it deeply. And he said, and how you get better at the game is you don't just all of a sudden become a better X and O's coach. You work at it. And I set a time every day. I'm going to watch a film for an hour of film every single day. And that really formed me for the rest of my life, for the rest of my career. And LB, I'm telling you, in the 15 years since that phone call, I've only missed a handful of days where watching film for an hour every day. So how did I get on this? All right. So I love film. And Bob's like, Zach, you got to find a way to separate yourself. And I get the idea. And early on, I would send coaches clinic notes, because that was my way to network rather than just send them a note. What if I went to this clinic? Hey, LB, here's a set of clinic notes, Jay Wright on zone offense. I type it up and I'd send it out to 400 coaches in the country. And I had a good relationship with the business office at Fordham, and I would send it out everywhere. So essentially, I was like, all right, how can I package this? How can I help people? But how can I make this work for me? And I came up with the idea for a website and came up with Pick and Pop with a Twitter account. And Bob really pushed me, because I really like Bob. I love Bob. I love Bob to death. And one thing he did is he really felt it was part of his job to develop the younger coaches on his staff. And he saw it as his job to promote their careers and that they were going to move on. And he really pushed me into this pickandpop.net thing. And one of my drawbacks was, do I come across as a know-it-all? And frankly, there's 2 jobs that I felt like I thought I could be in position for. And I've been told, like, hey, they think the pick and pop thing has rubbed them the wrong way. They think you're a know-it-all. And what bothers me a little bit on it is my name appears once on the site and appears once on the Twitter account. I try to go the best way I can to not make it about me and to really be about, I found this interesting. I maybe think you would too. And so I would say if anyone gets a misconception I know I'm proud of my opinions and I've thought deeply about it, but also, like, I would say this is like, if you just look at it as like Zach thinks he knows everything, I don't at all. One thing about it is the more you learn, the less you realize you know. And there's so many great coaches. And I'll tell you this, if you've ever heard one thing out of my mouth, not one thing out of my mouth has been my own original thought. It's been stuff I've studied. It's been stuff I've stolen from people. So I would say that, if anything, Lamar, is people kind of misconstrue the website and how much I share with other coaches as me thinking I've got this game figured out, because I know I don't. And I know there's not one thing I've come up with that was my own. It was all of it stolen. As coaches, we're all thieves.
You're 100% right. Like, but no, I mean, I know people, like you just said, that I think that's a misconception. I just think you did the right thing. You branded yourself, and like I would have never thought that what you just told me. But I mean, I tell you what, it's very popular. A lot of people think highly of you, not just in the United States, but like it's international. Like you big. I've been on Zoom calls with a lot of international guys, and they like, oh, Zach. I mean, so like it's
no,
huge.
and I would really I would encourage coaches. I would encourage young coaches to think about doing it respectfully. And maybe it's not, and for that, maybe it's not a coach's website. Maybe it's something else. But like, what do you love to do, and can you find a way to package it in an appropriate manner that you can sell yourself? And like, listen, LB, I've gone 2 jobs off pick and pop, off relationships that were built off that. I mean, some of my biggest contacts have been built off that, and you have to find a way to do it appropriately. But I mean, I think I thank Bob every day for encouraging me to do that kind of stuff and being out there in a way with what I love to do, and that's study the game.
That's terrific, man. I'm gonna ask you this, coaching. I mean, we're educators. That's what we are. You like you said, you're always learning, you're always teaching. So we're educators in this business. That's what coaching is. We always tell players that the basketball court is like a classroom. So you're always learning. What do you try to teach or educate to your players besides basketball?
I think you're trying to educate them. I think if anything in our society right now is there's flawed misconceptions of what it means to be a man. And we'll go like, there's a flawed sense of masculinity and what defines masculinity. And I think at all times, and I think it becomes more impactful as you grow older. Because frankly, right now I'm a little too young. I'm not too young to have conversations, don't get me wrong. But I try to form and formulate conversations and frame people and frame the concept of life. I know we're getting a little out there with this, but of what it means to be a man. And because I think constantly they're being told in society and they're being lied to about this false sense of of masculinity. And you're ultimately, for me, because I coach men, so I don't want to sound like a chauvinist here, just talking about that. So, but as what's it mean to be a man? And I think it means being able to maintain healthy relationships. And I've spent time thinking about that and studying it and reading books. Why does sexual assault happen? Why does domestic violence happen? But even being able to maintain healthy relationships with your mother, with your brother, with your dad, with your teammates, and being able to have conversations and have disagreements and being able to do that. So constantly, that's something that that's the kind of the aim. And now there's different skills you can learn within that. Because ultimately there's many tools, and just like a skill might be throwing a pocket pass. Well, in life, being able to hold relationships and being able to do different things can lead up to that, what is a realized sense of masculinity and what it is to be a man and be a person that is ready to have a family.
Wow, that's deep right there. I love it.
Yeah, we went deep there. It's funny when you asked the question, I wasn't anticipating going that deep. And frankly, it kind of challenged me to think about why I do what I do. And why I do what I do is I want to be a part of it. Like, if I went real deep on it, like,
no, I love it.
I had a small family growing up. Like, it was me and my brother. My brother's 5 years older. And frankly, I actually asked myself, like, why do I do what I do? I think a big part of it is that I never had that like big group. And I swear, like, I actually don't like a team being framed as family, because I actually think family is unconditional, where I think team is highly conditional. If my cousin got 2 DUIs, I still would love him. I still would have to love him. He's part of my family. Whereas if one of our players got 2 DUIs, he just couldn't be a part of our family anymore. He couldn't be a part of our program anymore. So, like, frankly, I think one's highly conditional, one's unconditional. But as I think about it, I think the reason why I do what I love is I love being a part of something that's bigger than myself. I love being a part of a bigger atmosphere that I didn't have growing up. Not that my family wasn't loving it, just we didn't have that like huge, like 10-person family, all the cousins coming over. We didn't have that. So frankly, I think part of why I love having my players over for food and for Sunday football is because I get a little piece of that, because that's something I didn't have growing up.
I mean, I loved every minute of that. That's awesome. I'm gonna ask you this, and in this business, we don't have regrets. I mean, that's what it is. You made the decision. This is what, you decided to do or didn't do. And everybody, sometimes guys look back on their career. Like, talk about something that whether you made a decision to or not to take a job, or somewhere you went, you go back and look and say, what if I would have made it? Not a regret, but more like, why did I make that decision, or why didn't I?
So I'll kind of get with two pieces of advice I love to give young coaches. One is never turn down a basketball opportunity. I referenced that earlier. I'm at Indiana State today because I didn't turn down a basketball opportunity. I was at University of Maine. University of Maine. That's 4.5 hours north of Boston. We practiced on Saturday afternoon. I got a chance to go to, I connected with the Celtics where they let me go to a 2-a-day training camp on Sunday. One practice at noon, one practice at 4. I don't want to be late. So 4.5 hour drive, must have left around 6:30, drove down to Boston, stopped at Dunkin' Donuts, got my coffee, drove 4.5 hours down to Boston, got there for their practice. And I sit next to a guy. And I was like, this dude looks a little familiar. We get to talking. Josh Schertz, Lincoln Memorial, they had just gone to the Final Four. We get to talking a little bit. And he said, oh, you were on Pick and Pop. We connect there. We're going back and forth a little bit. We watch practice. There's 3 hours in between the two sessions. Hey, what are you doing for lunch? We go for lunch, talk hoops the next 3 hours, go to the second practice. We've been in touch the last 5.5 years. He calls me, hey, I got a chance to go to Indiana State. Obviously we built a relationship over that time. I'm here because I never turned down a basketball opportunity. I got in the car, drove 4.5 hours back, never turned down a basketball opportunity. Second thing, never make a move in the first 7 years of your life based on money. It's tough, I would say, and it's hard. And I would say this, as long as you can have a roof over your head, as long as you can make things work, as long as you can make the car payment. Now, pause. If you have a way to get out of that car payment, I would find a way to buy can I swear here? Yeah. I can find a way to buy the shitty used car that doesn't have a car payment, so you can't be tied down. But frankly, every move in my first 7 years, a quote I love, there's a competitive advantage to anyone in the room that can hold the longest lens, that can think the most long game possible. Play the long game. So in your first 7 years, if you can play the long game as much as possible, if you can just make moves based on how does this impact me down the road, I would do it that way. Early in my life, I had an opportunity to triple my salary and get benefits and get a car. If I had to do it over again, I actually wouldn't have made the move. Now, it's really hard at the time to say it, and believe me, I've been there, but I don't think you should ever make moves based on salary in your first 7 years in the business. Ultimately, you got a family, you got to do what's right for your family. That's a whole different deal. But those are two pieces of advice I would say, and I think the second one correlates to your question of I'd do whatever I can. I just make moves based on where does this get me in the long run? Does this align me with a dude that's a rock star in our business? Does this get me into a different level in terms of put me in a position where I can meet people that can get different jobs? Like frankly, like what I would do early in my career, I would have done whatever I could to get to the highest level possible, because that's where it happens. Something I miss in my career is I've never worked to the high major level. I almost did. I worked at one for 2.5 days. Story for another day. But my point is, I think just working and being at that upper level and working with people of that ilk and at that level would be very beneficial for a young person's career. Not that you can't do it without it, but that is something I would encourage young people to do, is try to get to that highest level. And not that there's other ways to do it, but those are two things I would pass along, LB.
Those are two great educational pieces of information. So young guys definitely should.
And they're not mine. Kevin Eastman said, never turn down a basketball opportunity. I got to always give credit where it's due. And don't take a job in your first 7 years on salary. I don't know who that is, but it's someone smarter than me. So everything's stolen, LB, man. There's not one thing that's mine.
I feel you. I'm gonna ask you this. We don't have to name names, but like, what is the strangest, weirdest thing a player has done outside of the basketball court that you just like shook your head or just like, I can't believe this kid.
LB, I worked for 2.5 years at Iona. We had some characters. We had a cast of characters, and I used to always joke that I was living in the Bronx at the time with my college roommates, and we had some characters. I mean, we had some dudes that were, whew. And I'd always joke that I'd put my phone down at night. I put it down face down on the desk, because if the phone was ringing past 10:30, I knew it wasn't something good, and I could get a quick Hail Mary in before, like, please, like, don't, like, please tell me Mike Glover didn't do this, or please tell me Trinity Field. It'd be one of the dudes that I own. I mean, we had a bad relationship happen, and a breakup, and one of our New York City, always goes back to New York City, one of our New York City guards did something, I'm going to say unseemly, to her car. And little did he know, at 3 a.m, little did he know that there was a camera filming the whole thing, a security camera filming the whole thing. So it would have to be that. And I'm not, we had some dudes doing some crazy stuff, but it would be something along those lines.
I feel you. And
I'm not naming names.
When you threw out some of those names, yeah, I remember. I can remember those days. I remember those guys as.
And they're also guys that, like, you know, it was. I loved them to death. Taj Ridley, love him to death. Scott Machado, Trinity Fields, Jermel Jenkins, Mike Glover. Kyle Smith was a choir boy, so he wasn't doing that. But you know, Momo Jones. Whoo! I was losing it anyways, but I'll tell you right now, Mike Glover and Momo Jones took some expedited that process a little bit. Randy DeZouvre, who's from the toughest part of, you know, Montreal, and he graduates from college, and he's got a family going, and that's what's really cool. And you know, just, you know, being able to impact guys' lives at that way, you know, at that point in life. And I was so young too. I wasn't that much older than them. I'm sure Randy was older than me. Mike Glover was older than me working at Iona.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the biggest accomplishment that you have experienced since being in coaching?
I mean, going to the NCAA tournament, Iona, you know, because that team, I'll be honest, that team was actually, we had a lot better, we had more talented teams. That team was like, Tim did such a good job coaching that team. We had a really good player. Momo Jones had just the heart of a lion. He played so hard. That team, and I'll say this, like, we had far more talented teams that didn't go to the NCAA tournament. So that tournament team in 2013 at Iona was special to me, because I actually thought we just kind of willed it. I think Momo willed it. I think Tim Close willed it. Coach Close is just such an unbelievable coach. You know, that's one. And, you know, I think being a part of, you know, Army West Point for 5 years, such a special place, you know, and kind of growing that program and building that's a big part. But frankly, LB I think it's still ahead of me. And I think it's still ahead of me that, you know, and I can't wait to see kind of what's next with it and where it takes me. But I hope it's still ahead of me. I hope my best time hasn't passed yet.
I think your best is ahead. That's what I believe too. I'm gonna ask you this, since you're like you just said, a basketball junkie. So I'm hoping you can come up with an answer for this. What movie or TV show title best describes like your week, your week?
Wow, that's tough. Best movie or TV show title describes my week. Being out in the Midwest the first time as an East Coast guy, dazed and confused comes in, because I'm still trying to figure this place out, man. I mean, the last week here has been a little, because it's different, LB. Like, I'm used to on the East Coast, like, there's a different walk of life out here. I want to, I'm trying to think, because I want to, I know it sounds corny, LB, but it goes back to something I said. Like, I've never worked a day in my life. Like, you know, there's parts of my job I don't love, but like, I do this. I love being a freaking college basketball coach. I love coaching. I mean, like, this is so cool to me. And I went to Fordham with some dudes making a heck of a lot of money. And it's funny them calling me how jealous they are about like me getting the chance to do what I do. So I'm not going to act like everything in my job is rosy. And I know, I swear I want to write a book one day. I want to say, so you want to be a college coach? And and like just talk about the different things that I didn't think college coaching involved that it did. And I actually think like Unmasked is basically the like YouTube series version of it. But you know, that, like, I always think about that. So I don't want to act like it's all rosy, because there's parts of my job that's like, dang, I wish I didn't have to do this. But frankly, you and I know that as you scale up a little bit more, you do less and less of those tasks fall to you, and more of them fall to the guys underneath you as GAs and whatnot. So I would say that. So I don't have a great one for you. I'll go Days and Confused, just describe my first week in the Midwest.
I'll take it. What's your favorite? Because obviously you like you said, you borrow, I'm gonna say steal, but you borrow different quotes. But what's your favorite word or phrase that you like to use?
I think, I mean, the word would be passion. Is that like, I have such a burning desire. I love this game. I love coaching. That passion is like the thing that always comes back to me. And frankly, the players I like working with, coaches I like working with, it's almost like, are you passionate? Yes. Then you and I are going to get along. And frankly, like, there's a little bit of like, sometimes, and I got to get better at it. Like, how do I connect and coach the kid that may not love it just yet? Can I get him to love it? Or can we work to get the results we need to get, and where we need to get as a team without him loving it? That's what comes up a lot. And I would say the second thing would be living life with intentionality, about having a purpose to what you do, and do your habits match your mission, in that you say you want to do this, you say you want to be this. Well, does your day-to-day, so I think maybe boil down this, does your day-to-day habits match that? Does your day-to-day schedule match that? Because you say you want to do that in a year. Well, what are you doing today to do it? And what are you doing tomorrow? What about the day after? And so a lot of my conversations with guys center around that does what you're doing right now match with what you want a year from now? And I would say a lot of our conversation now, passion makes that a lot easier, because passion is the thing that greases that wheel and keeps you doing that. That's what bridges from where you're at right now to where you want to go. Is passion kind of drives that discipline that it takes to get there.
Awesome. That's definitely awesome. I like that. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I hit it already with never turn down a basketball opportunity. I think I hit it, not to kill that. I'm trying to think if there's something that else would pop up.
Hey, keep preaching that over and over. Maybe somebody
Yeah.
will get that.
Yeah, I would say that. That's the one. That one piece of advice, that's the one. I mean, Jared Grosso gave me so many over the years. And I'm trying to think of like one jumps out, but frankly, like I talked about Tom Crean. That piece of advice shaped me as well. About, there's always gonna be room in the game for guys that study the game deeply. Those would be the couple that pop up to me as best piece of advice that had the biggest impact on my career.
Awesome.
One more would be like my dad's encouragement to just read. I mean, I'm a big reader, and he always he operated with that of like, if you don't know the answer, I bet it's out there in some book. And so that just his encouragement to do that. And I would say like, in different ways, maybe going back all the way to my coaches growing up, is just the advice to like pour yourself into your guys, and that's why you do it. And just that advice has kind of shaped my career and shaped, my dealings with players and why I do what I do.
Love it. You're not a self-promoter. Like you said, on your website, your name appears one time.
Yeah.
So no one even really know.
Yeah.
If you had to choose 3 adjectives to describe yourself, which would you choose?
All right. Passionate, hardworking. I'm trying to think of a third one. Energy. I don't know if that's an adjective, but the word energy. I would say those will be the 3. Another one would be initiator. I like to, I'm a guy that I like to brainstorm, get different ideas going, and initiating them. Those would be the 3. Those would be I guess I gave you 4.
I'll take. What person and or event, it could be either, has had the most influence on your life?
I think any coach, if you ask them, I think why coaches get into coaching is because early on in their career, they were exposed the kind of impact a great coach can have on someone. So I had great coaches growing up. I had great high school coaches, great middle school coaches. And so I think for me, it was the idea of this guy made me feel better about myself. I'd love to be able to do that in someone. That was huge. Jared Grasso, I spent 5 years around Jared Grasso. He taught me what it was like to be a college coach. He works his ass off. There are not, now he's a head coach, but like I can't imagine there are many coaches in the country that work harder than that dude. So he taught me what it means, like how to work, and he showed me the ropes with it. He taught me so much. Fran Fraschilla has taught me so much over the years. Rob Kennedy, his advice, the things he taught me still echo to this day. An event, I'm struggling to come up with an exact event that shows it to me, but I would say almost just going back to just the way my high school coach made me feel about myself. Like that's the event that, like, all right, I want to do that to someone. I want to do that to someone. I want to do that to many kids. That would be, I think that would be the event for me.
Awesome. Well, look, I'd like to end in this question. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your young or younger self to prepare for as an assistant coach?
Yeah. What I would say is it's not trench warfare, man. And I was so early because I was actually a little insecure about my credentials. I was a little insecure about I wasn't a player. I was a manager. I'm a 5'10" dude. Like why? Like, and I was so anxious to prove to everyone how much I knew. And I was like so combative about it. And I would be like, no, this is my point, and this is how I think. And I was so aggressive with like showing people this is how hard I worked. And I would just say, man, like just scale back a little bit. Just scale back. Like have a rhythm. And I think I was like early on so like bullheaded with it. That like I made things harder for myself than they needed to be because I was so aggressive with my opinion. We're just like ease into it. Like ultimately, people will see your value. You don't need to you don't need to like hit them over the head with your opinion.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Well, look, before we sign off, we gotta get through this story because
I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going.
I know exactly.
So it's summer 2008, and Zach is it's interesting. There was a kid by the name of Shabazz Napier. This was before he became Shabazz Napier, right? Yeah. So I got a call. I called Mo Vasquez, who's running Metro Boston. Hey, Mo, I need to really get Shabazz to camp, get him out there. And he was like, Lamar, he doesn't have any money. I said, don't worry about it. Someone is paying for camp for him. They've already funded the money. I said, can you get him to a bus or a train station? I'll get him to the bus station. And it's in New York City. We're in New Jersey, Trenton, New Jersey. And so I needed to find someone that I trusted, which was Zach at the time.
But LB, I remember you just called out, you said, where's the Fordham kid? Because you were like, if it's New York, like, you know it. And I live by an operation as act as if. Man, just act as if. Sometimes you just got to fake it. Like, yeah. And you're like, do you know how to get to Chinatown? I was like, yeah, I do. Yeah, all the time. Because I didn't have a car in New York at all. So because I said to you, I said, I do, but I don't have a car.
And I said, take mine. And I had the SUV. Yeah, I had the SUV. I said, yo, I just gave you the keys and said, oh yeah, it's whatever. I didn't know where my car was parked, but I'm giving keys for you to go and find it. And so then I get a call.
You said it was an SUV. You said it was what were you driving at the time?
A Yukon. It was a Yukon.
You said it was a Yukon.
And all I know was hours later, I got a call from Shabazz Napier saying, hey, coach, we're at the bus station. Like, who's picking us up? And I was like, oh, the guy's not there yet? Okay, let me find out. And I called, and you were still in Jersey. Yeah. But you had spent how much time in the
so I get in the car. So LB tells me he drives a Yukon. He says on the 4th level, I go get in the Yukon. I put the keys in. It's not turning. And all of a sudden on my right shoulder, someone goes, yo, what's up? I turn on my shoulder and I said, oh, shoot, are you with Lamar? And he says, yes. He goes, these are the keys. He hands me the keys. So I'm like, why would Lamar give me one pair of keys? I pull it in, I turn it, and we drive out of the parking lot. We take a right out of campus. And I'm like, none of this is making sense. And so I said, how do you know Lamar? I'm like, why would Lamar not tell me there's like his son? I don't know, like, is this his son? So how do you know Lamar? And he said, who's Lamar? Woo, pull over. Is this Lamar Barrett's car? No, it's not. I thought you said you knew Lamar. He goes, I thought you asked if I knew my mom. You turn back into the garage, park the car back in the spot. I will notice there's a Yukon about four doors down. I get in the Yukon, it turns. Now, I don't know where the heck I'm going. So I just am driving around. I told Lamar I knew where I was going. This is before Google Maps or anything like that. I call my mom. She's literally looking at it, giving me directions to Chinatown. I go pick up Shabazz. Do you remember who the other kid in the car was?
It's 6'7" kid. He ended up going to Robert Morris. Did he go to Robert Morris?
Or
I thought
he didn't have a great career. Mario Monroe. I picked them up, and they're actually great kids. And then we laugh. And I'm done right now. I saw Shabazz at a Boston Celtics training camp, and he was like, "Yo, what's up?" No, actually, it was Brooklyn Nets. He was with Brooklyn at that time, and he was like, "Yo, my guy, hoop group." And so it was funny. I got lost going up there, and I was so confused. And then I get these guys back. I was so confused, but I knew how to get to Newark because we drove by Newark. So later in the week, you had me drive Kyle Marshall home to the airport. So Kyle Marshall's from Florida, ended up playing at Butler's, now works for Luke Yaklich at UIC. When I went to drive him home, I knew how to get to Newark, but I knew it wasn't the quickest way, but I knew that could get me there. So like I went a wacky ass way to Newark, and I remember his guy, and I forget who his guy is.
It was Juan Pierre.
Yes. And he's kind of like, is this the way to get to Newark? I was like, I'll be honest, not really, but I just know it'll get us there. And so that's funny, man. Hoop group, so many stories. I
still get calls from Alberto Juan Pierre now.
Exactly.
He was on one of my Zooms the other night.
He had a kid. It's funny because like 5 years later, I recruited a kid of his that from JUCO that ended up going to Murray State. A good player, JUCO kid. I remember we reconnected after at that because we were trying to get me to choose Murray State over Iona. But we reconnected. He goes, I remember you, man. You drove us out to Newark. So funny stories, man.
Yeah, funny stories, man. Well, look, Zach, I want to thank you again, man, for being a guest on the show and being unmasked. Is there anything you want to leave with the viewers before we go?
Nah, I'm good, man. This is a lot of fun, man. This is a blast. I love what you're doing. I think it kind of gives a glimpse of like what's it really like in coaching. I also think it's like there's so many things I learned over the years, and I think this is a cool way to kind of expose different coaches to it and the lessons you learn along the way and the stuff you screwed up and like you're just trying to get better with it as you go. But I appreciate what you're doing, man. You've always been a good friend since all the way back in 2008. Let me drive your car. Even though I'm a terrible driver and, driving a big ass car and, I appreciate it over the years, man.
Well, you're welcome, man. And I thank you. So thank you viewers for watching another great show. Stay tuned for the next guest as we get them unmasked. See you next time and stay safe.